we want to learn how to influence things instead of control them. If I take charge, if I try to influence a situation, it doesn't mean it's going to work out the way I want to. I'm just going to do my best, and then I'll have to deal with whatever it is. See, that's the attitude. So emotional sobriety, we can say, is really learning to cope with life as life is.
Bill Wilson, co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, wrote in 1952, "If we examine every disturbance we have, great or small, we will find at the root some unhealthy dependence and its consequent demand." Wilson suggested that if we could identify and continually surrender these unrealistic and unrealizable demands, that we may then be able to accomplish what he imagined to be the recovery's next frontier, something he called emotional sobriety. Flash forward 70 years and join psychotherapists and best-selling authors Tom Rutledge and Dr. Alan Berger, who have taken up the mantle of exploring Bill Wilson's new frontier. Welcome to Emotional Sobriety.
Welcome to your emotional sobriety, or welcome to all of our emotional sobriety. This is the first episode of our newly reframed podcast. I'm Tom Rutledge. I'm with Dr. Alan Berger and our esteemed producer, Patrick Newman. And we are here to investigate, discover, and recover what Alan calls the best in us. And I like that a lot. I also tend to think that what we're doing with emotional sobriety is kind of going as deep as we can and exploring and healing the dependency beneath all other dependencies. Maybe that's overstated. What do you think, Alan?
I love that. I remember you shared that one other time, and it really seems to be the ground floor, doesn't it, to all of this other stuff, is the way I think about it, right? It's like, what's in the basement, right? And this is the basement stuff. This is where it all starts, man, is what kind of a foundation do we build our life on?
Right. And it's 12. Yeah. I've often thought, what do people who aren't alcoholics and drug addicts and all this stuff do for, to learn and grow? Cause I don't know what I would have done without the 12 steps. It's like, and I don't think it's the only way to do things. I just think it's been a powerful way for me to learn, but the idea is my first sponsor, you've heard me quote this before. My first sponsor said, and he used the word mentioned very specifically. He said, "There's 12 steps of recovery, and only one of them mentions alcohol." He had a perfect pause, and then he said, "The rest of them are about how to be better people."
Yes.
And it's like, that's what I think we're focused on. That's everything I've learned from you about the concept of emotional sobriety that you've been working on for a long time. I mean, one of the things that I've said, I think I actually wrote it in a piece of a bit of an endorsement for your new book, by the way, is and I don't know if it's being used or not, but the idea that Bill Wilson, the co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, began, I think I've got the dates about right, writing about emotional sobriety in 1952. And I believe that at that same time, somebody we know was born, and that was you. It's like, I may be a little bit grandiose in thinking this, but it seems to me that you are the person. He talked about emotional sobriety being the next frontier. I think you're the guy who's taken the baton from Bill Wilson, and we're seeing and I think one of the silver linings of the COVID year that we've had has been that with the stuff we're doing online, this has been expanding pretty quickly, and people are really tuning into it. And it's one of the main reasons we decided to change our podcast to go with this flow. So,
well, thanks, Tom. I'm humbled by your comments. I'm very excited about the work that we've been doing. And there is something about this last year that's really helped me. And it's in no small part in terms of what you and I have been doing. That's helped me really put this stuff together in ways that I didn't even know I was putting together.
Yeah.
We have that Thursday night meeting that I started with COVID, the Emotional Sobriety Anonymous, I called it. just to separate it from the other groups, to just invite anybody that's interested in a better life. You don't have to have any label to come there. If you want to be there, you're welcome.
Oh, I love it. I love what you say at the beginning of each meeting. The only requirement for being here is that you want to be here. I love that.
That's it. And that you're welcome. I mean, and Patrick, our producer, will provide the information for that meeting, you know, in the description of this podcast. But what's happened this year is that it's really been a time where this stuff, and I know you've experienced this too, is in being the creative person you are and the writer you are, you find yourself coming up with ideas and putting things together that make you say, wow.
Yeah.
Where did that come from? How did that coalesce? How did that come together? Where did that idea come from? And I love that. It's that it's discovering these new, you know, ways of putting things together. It's like I had one the other day when I was doing some promos for my new book and talking about emotional sobriety. And I was saying, look, one of the first experiences we have in supporting ourselves is when we take the first breath of life. And I never thought about that as self-support. Right. It is, of course it is, right? It's so obvious that it is. But when I put that together, that's the beginning of emotional sobriety. I mean, emotional sobriety is learning how to support yourself, how to take care of yourself. If I didn't take that breath, I wouldn't be here. I mean, if I don't continue to breathe, I'm not here. That's an example, a physical example of what self-support looks like. But emotional sobriety now takes that idea of self-support and applies it to how do we live our life and support ourselves in our life. The more I depend on my environment for doing for me, it's like sometimes our environment has to support us. God bless those folks that had COVID and that couldn't breathe and had to go on a ventilator. They needed environmental support to deal with that. Now we learned that maybe some of them were put on a ventilator too quick, and that let them figure that out, you know, and let their body and give them some other support to do it. So at times we need environmental support. Nobody's saying that we can do all this stuff by ourselves, but there's a lot of things that for me, where my immaturity came from is I looked for my environment to do for me things I needed to learn how to do for myself.
Yes.
Like self-esteem. Let's take that for an example.
Right. And environment specifically, very often being other people. Circumstances. Right. I need you to think this way. I need you to feel this way. You know, not even in a controlling way, but just the underlying. I mean, this is what I've gotten from this is that underlying belief that we may not even be consciously aware of as we begin this process. Underlying belief: if you don't approve of me, if you don't like me, then either. I mean, it could be something horrible, like I'm a bad person or whatever, but it could just be that there's something wrong. You know, that I'm not okay. I'm not as okay as I could be because Alan's thinking this. And it may be that you're thinking that. The other piece, you know, this is ultimately, you know, I mean, emotional sobriety is also codependent recovery on steroids. Yeah. It's like, I mean, it really is because it's like, it's about codependency is about giving our power away. You know, it's like whatever you think of me determines how I feel about myself. And it's not even that, it's whatever I think you're thinking of me determines how I feel about myself. So the idea is, and what happens, you're talking about, you're describing the idea that it's not about being so separate from our environment, but it's about not being dependent on the environment, but about being interdependent.
Yeah, you see, it's the kind of contact we make with our life, whether it's I'm making a contact in terms of my relationship with someone, I'm dealing with a certain situation that happened in life, you know, let's say, you know, I'm in a natural disaster, right? That's life happening to me. Well, how do I respond to that, right? What do I do? How do I now meet that disaster and find a way to deal with it in the best way possible so that I grow myself from the experience? I don't become diminished from it. See, those are the things we're looking at. And that's what this show is about. So if you're tuning into this, stand by. What we're going to be talking about we're starting it today, I should say, and we're going to be continuing this, and we're going to be having this discussion, I hope, for many, many years, Tom, is that we're going to be talking about ways to help you learn how to better support yourself, how to better take care of yourself, how to grow up, right? This is all about growing up, because the arc of growing up is to go from completely dependent in our mother's womb to being able to stand on our own 2 feet and to provide for ourselves, and meaning all of the things that we got in the womb, meaning I have to regulate my own temperature. I have to provide my nourishment. I have to protect myself. All those things that were taken care of when I was in her womb. But as I differentiate from mom, now it becomes my job. But somehow we've never connected that emotionally. We understand it physically. We get it. We get it completely. But we don't get it emotionally. And that's what emotional sobriety is about.
Psychological freedom. It's like it's freedom for us. It's like it's to be able to say I can come and go, and I can interact with my world, and yet and this is an important point, and I'll be wearing this one out, because I just always do, which is, it's not to say we are in control of much, actually, but we're in charge. And to me, that may seem just like semantics, but it's more than that to me. It's like, I always say, forget about control and just and focus on being in charge. And it's, as corny as the metaphor is, it's the one that works. It's like, we don't, if nobody's cheating, then it's random what cards we get dealt, and it's like, but we could set up if you were a really good card player and I wasn't, then we could set up an experiment in which you were dealt better hands than I am, and you would still beat me at cards because you know how to play cards. And that's what we want to be. We want to teach people to be good card players, and we want to teach them. And you mentioned something earlier that brought me, thought it's a good time as we begin this to put some of the vocabulary out here. Is something you and I have been calling since the beginning of I think since the beginning of the video series we did at the beginning of the COVID thing, is positive opportunism. The idea, you living your life according to the question, how can I take this situation, no matter how difficult or negative it is, and use it to become a better person? Not just survive, but be better.
That's right. To be better. And it's our belief that each and every one of us can learn how to do that. No matter how traumatized you were in your childhood, no matter what kind of experiences you've had and how many traumas you've had to deal with subsequently, no matter what kind of attachments you started with in your life, that it is our belief, we have 100% faith in that you can grow yourself along these lines. What you'll never hear from us is we will never give you any indication that we think that it's easy, or that it should be easier for you, or, oh, you ought to be able to do this. That's a part that we don't know. Everybody has their own, so if you want to know how my process was, then you better listen to how I describe it, because I'm the one who knows that. If you want to know about Alan will describe it, and we want to listen to everyone that's in. And I like to think of everybody being in the conversation with us. And we love to say at the outset too, is we love to hear from people between our podcast. I mean, our contact information is in the notes. Email either one of us, ask questions. We've in the previous incarnation of this podcast, there have been some people who have sent questions, and we've actually based entire shows around that. So we want to be relevant to listeners. Yeah, we definitely want to be relevant to listeners, and it's, to me, what you're saying about each of us has our own individual path to this emotional sobriety, to achieving it. And what might be a small victory for one person can be an incredibly large victory for someone else. And just keep that in mind, is that there is no criteria or standard. You are growing yourself. This is an individual program, completely individualized. A lot of treatment centers say that we provide individualized care, and everybody goes to group therapy. I mean, it's that weird thing. But this is an individualized program. you're going to take this stuff and you're going to work on this stuff in the way that you need to work on it. You're going to grow your pace. And that's the important thing to do. All of us are going to do that in a different way. What do they say in the big book? Sometimes slowly, sometimes quickly is people having a spiritual awakening. Well, it's the same thing with this stuff. Your awakening can come sometimes slowly, sometimes quickly. There might be moments when you go, oh God, I got it. You make this big leap forward. And then you move by inches after that for a while. And then you make another big leap. I mean, that's okay. There is no plan. There's no program. There's nothing that dictates how this is going to unfold for you.
Right.
Also progress, not perfection.
Yeah,
well, that's what that is, isn't it? Is that what we're talking about? And that's Patrick, that's our producer, Patrick. Patrick, say hi to everyone.
Hey everyone, happy to have you here with us.
If it weren't for Patrick, we wouldn't be here. Alan and I would be talking to each other on the phone.
There wouldn't be all these things. And a shout out to you, Patrick. You've done a phenomenal
Thank
job
you.
with
Yes.
our former podcast, Start Right Here. And if anybody's just tuning in and you want to hear some of previous shows that Tom and I have done, please go back and look at the archives for Start Right Here. There's a lot of great things, and we're really now, heading out in this new direction, Tom, that I'm very excited about, because I just see that there's so many important things for us to talk about with this emotional sobriety.
It feels to me like what we've done is and I like working this way. I kind of approach, it's just a creative process. I'm making big gestures with my arms and hands. It's like you cast the net wide, and you just go. And one of the things that you and I have had in common, and Patrick has either is like us this way or is incredibly patient with us, is that we just show up and we just start jabbering, and we go where we are. Because you and I have discovered, we've talked a little bit more about how you and I came to be together, but it's like we found very organically early on that we have it's a lot in common, I think, in a lot of ways, but I think it's a lot complementary too. It's like, it's not just in common. And I think that what's happened with this whole process is that I think I do, and I think you do too. It's like I feel more focused now from the process that we've had so far. We started with, when the COVID surrounded us in March of last year, or by that time you had begun the 12-step emotional sobriety Thursday night thing, and you asked me to do the video series. So we did 12 video things, because everything you do is always 12, because that's all your books, including your new book I'll plug here, which is
count, Tom.
I love it. I think that's called branding. I think it's a good thing. It's like but the 12, I have read that book, and it's not out just yet, but you can pre-order it, by the way. It's 12 essential insights for emotional sobriety. And it's like, and I love the fact that in the subtitle, you use the word unstuck. I actually had a manuscript years ago, one time called Getting Unstuck. And it never came to fruition, but it's like, I just think so much of what this work is about finding places, helping people find places where they're stuck, because this may reveal a little bit too much of my hippiedom here, but it's like, I think if we can get the blocks out, the healing is natural.
Yeah, that's right.
Can I ask you a question, Alan?
Yes.
How did emotional sobriety come in for you when you got COVID? Because I would have been pretty pissed if I got COVID, and the lingering symptoms and all that stuff had to have been aggravating, to say the least. And would you mind talking about that? Is that a bridge too far?
Not at all. I became infected last November, I believe it was, at the beginning of November, after a trip to visit my father-in-law and the rest of the family. We were concerned that he was going to be dealing with a medical problem that might take his life. So we forced ourselves to travel at a time. Took a lot of precautions on the way there. Never thought to ask him to take a precaution after he went to the hospital. And it seemed he did test before he went in because you couldn't go into a hospital without coming back with a clean COVID test, but didn't even think to ask him to test afterwards. And so he came out, and unfortunately he was infected, or fortunately. And then we were in a house, and I forgot how many folks were there, but let's say that it was 14. Everybody in the house became infected. So I came back from that trip, and I started to feel the symptoms. We moved into the house on a Saturday. He became sick on Tuesday. So 4 days afterwards, I became sick 4 days after that. And so that's when he started to manifest symptoms. I think that's when he was shedding the virus. And then I picked it up and then came back to California, and then I got sick. So at first I went through all my non-emotional sobriety reactions. I'm mad that he, why didn't he think about it? Why didn't I think about it? I got into the blame game for a while. And then I realized after I spent about maybe a day on that, how irrelevant all of that was. It didn't matter that how I got sick. What was important now is what was I going to do? And so I quickly, mobilized myself. I contacted my pulmonologist, and this is what we do. I think that after I work past all the obstacles or what I say is all my objections to reality, then I move into the acceptance of it.
That's a great way. Objections to reality. I'm writing that down. That's good.
And then I get busy with dealing with it. And I did. And thank God, I'm very grateful, because I was concerned about my age and my health and stuff, that how was I going to respond to it? Because, I had some of the preconditions that people were concerned about. I'm asthmatic, and I've struggled with asthma for the last, 10 years or so of my life. And I was afraid I was going to end up in a hospital on a ventilator. I mean, I really was. I had a lot of anxiety about that. And I mobilized myself. I got my pulmonologist. I started to talk to her on a regular basis, my cardiologist, and they came together, and they, put me on some medications and stuff like that. And we did some therapeutic, interventions to keep me from ending up in the hospital. And they were successful. So I think that's the way I would say it is after I got past my objections to reality, I could start coping. And thank God I had a relationship with a really good pulmonologist, a good cardiologist, had a good relationship with them that I've developed over the years. And they were able to provide me with a lot of medical support and encouragement during a time when I would have had a high degree of anxiety.
Well, let me put an observation in here. And what you just described is one of the things I think that's very, very important for anybody approaching this idea of emotional sobriety and wanting to make it more than an idea. And that is, again, we'll kind of create some vocabulary here for ourselves. It's response time. It's like, when Patrick asked the question, what do you do in a situation like that? Well, this is a successful story of emotional sobriety. It's like I tell people, just like you do, it's like my reflexes, I don't think have ever changed. The things that piss me off still piss me off. It's like I actually, when a driver cuts me off in traffic, nowadays I actually say, well, who taught you to drive, darling, rather than you motherfucker, you deserve to die. It's like, but it's like the first reflex is still there sometimes. And it's like, you have that. And so the idea, I want people who are applying this to themselves to know that the goal here, and this is not to make an excuse for any of us, but the goal is to shorten that response time. It's like if I think about how long would it have, if I act out in a way that I need to apologize to a friend or to my wife, it's like in the old days, how long would it have taken me to actually have that insight and make that change? Well, I used to never make it at all. So it's like it didn't happen. Now I can do it within maybe it'll be 24 hours, maybe even 20 minutes sometimes, however long that took you. That was when you're being hit by the information is somebody who was as absolutely as you and I've talked about it a lot, was very careful. And man, you're like me. I've never followed rules so much in my entire life. It's like, with possibly the exception to 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's
Right.
like, but as far as the COVID stuff, I have listened to the experts. I have followed those rules. We have been appropriately paranoid together as we've talked about this stuff, talking about how we go into grocery stores looking like, bank robbers. It's like, it's just bizarre, but it's like because you were absolutely concerned, and especially concerned because you have two young daughters now, and it's like, so yeah, I mean, this came out of the blue, and it makes sense to me that you were going to have a big reaction to it. But it's like, we got to witness that with you and being in touch with you through that time is you did turn it around. And but you didn't try to stuff it. You just went through it.
Just went through once I got past the objection part, but there was that.
I love that object.
I mean,
Your Honor, I object to reality.
Yeah, it's normal. I was going to say it's normal to have probably reams and reams of objections to reality, but I think the key is to not let those become an impediment to you doing what you need to do.
Well, it's
exactly.
At some point I realized is like how futile it is to figure out who's to blame. It's not going to take the virus away. I still have it. It's not going to, that doesn't change the reality. See, I think that's the important point here. And in many ways, we're going to define emotional sobriety in a lot of different ways, but we'll start today with defining emotional sobriety as an alignment with reality as reality is. See, it's getting to the point of being able to align myself with it and now get busy dealing with and coping with it.
Responding.
I love the work of a Dr. Murray Bowen, because he's the one who first started to take this idea of differentiation. And you're going to see how relevant this idea of differentiation is as we continue to talk about these things. But differentiation is just that autonomy, that emotional autonomy, that freedom that Tom was talking about earlier on. The more differentiated I become, the less I take things personally. The more autonomous my functioning is in my relationships. That's differentiation. And one of the great things that Bowen talked about with differentiation is that when we're undifferentiated, is that our thoughts and our emotions are woven together. They're fused. We don't know the difference between a thought and emotion. So I'll say things like, you made me angry, that kind of stuff, right? I'm fusing things instead of saying, I'm angry right now. You made me angry. See, there's a fusion there.
Right. Or how do you feel? I feel like kicking your ass. It's like, okay, well, we're not giving ourselves, there's no choice of behavior.
That's right. And the other thing, people say, how do you feel? Well, I feel that you're being unfair. See, that's not a feeling. That's a thought. Unfairness is a judgment about justice and those kinds of things. But I will think that I feel you're unfair is a feeling. So I have fused feelings with thoughts, right? And the more differentiated I become, the more my emotions exist juxtaposed to my thoughts. But my emotions don't influence my thoughts. My thoughts don't influence my emotion. They're separate systems. And when I'm healthy, I respect both of those. I take my feelings into consideration, but I also am thoughtful about it. Right. And so what Tom is saying is that when I then respond to a situation instead of react, I can take more what we call right action in the program, appropriate action. I can let the best of me respond to the situation instead of the king baby inside of me respond.
Instead of the first one who speaks. I mean, that's I
like that. You often said that. Tell people about that.
Right. Well, that's like, I think about the little committee of characters inside my head is there's a microphone, just as I'm sitting here, like there's one in front of me right now, but there's a microphone that gets to the mouth. Whoever's fastest to the microphone and who puts an elbow upside somebody else's head gets to the microphone. It's like, there's nobody there that's managing that. So what we're doing with emotional sobriety me is we will define things different ways at different times. And if it gets confusing, let us know and we'll clarify. But I'll also call certain characters the same name or different names at different times. But one of them is I just think of as the decision maker. And basically, I'm the guy at the microphone. I can listen to anybody over here. One guy yells, "I want to kick Alan's ass." I'm going like, okay, thanks for sharing, and then I can decide what I'm going to say.
That's right. See, and that's very important. See, I don't need to give voice to all the different parts of myself. See, that's I have a choice over those
right
things. And the other thing that Tom said earlier that I just want to say, when he says that, don't think of controlling these parts of you, just think of taking charge. And that is what that decision maker, the executive inside of us does. It sits down and says, okay, we're having a board of directors meeting. I want input from everyone, but I'm going to make the decisions here, right? It's that kind of thing. The buck stops with me. We want a part of us where the buck stops. Now, hopefully that part is your wisest part. Mm-hmm. A good idea to put that part of you in charge, right? Mm-hmm. Not the king baby, because the king baby or the puer prince. I mean, you don't want that part in charge. You want a guy that's going to be thoughtful, or a gal that's going to be thoughtful and weigh things out, bring some nobility to the situation, those kind of things. My dear friend Herb Kagan also says, we want to learn how to influence things instead of control them. I like that term too. Taking charge versus control. Influencing versus control. If I take charge, if I try to influence a situation, it doesn't mean it's going to work out the way I want to. I'm just going to do my best, and then I'll have to deal with whatever it is. See, that's the attitude. So emotional sobriety, we can say, is really learning to cope with life as life is, right? It's what is happening that I'm focusing on. It's the what is right now. This is what it is. So now how do I get busy dealing with it?
Right. And for anybody listening who basically it doesn't feel like you're in a place where the best of you is necessarily the one who's in the decision-making position, or or it's a new idea to even have a decision make. It's like, that's fine. It's like, understand that this is a process. Alan talked earlier about the fact that everybody's where they are in their process, and everybody's got their own process. It's like, there's no right way to be. There's no specific way you should be. It's like, just, I mean, what I would say is, as people are tuning in to this podcast, is if just come into it willing to learn something. If you learn something, that's great. It's like, if you're somebody who, if you're like me, if you're somebody who writing is how I think, and it took me a while to get to that place to understand that a lot of times the best thing I can do, and not everybody's this way, but I've known a lot of people who are, and they're not necessarily professional writers. It's just people who process, it's like I can sit down in either with a notebook and a pen, or even on the computer, and just start writing about something. And it'll take me to a different place than I have been. It's because that's what a lot of what we're going to be doing with emotional sobriety is looking for. We want to create the concepts, but we also want to create the practices, the ways to create practice, so that you can take what we're talking about, and putting it into play in your life. And so sometimes writing is one of those really important things you can do, because if you take an idea and you start writing, maybe you have two different perspectives about it. You write about both perspectives. It'll take you to a place that you didn't see coming. It's like, and
streamlines the voices in the boardroom kind of thing.
It does. Yeah. Absolutely.
So let me just give everybody kind of a preview of coming attractions as we wrap up this first show. So in the weeks and months to come, in years and decades and centuries, I'm going to be here for a long time.
What a opener.
in a galaxy far away.
I'm tired.
Yeah, I heard that.
I didn't sign up for all that. Wait, I'll give you the next year. Are you talking about next year? My God.
Trying to get to June
at some point in time. Then we got to go back to last episode and start right here and deal with saying goodbye.
Saying goodbye.
All right. So let me try to be. Did that sound grandiose to anybody?
No, it's
pretty awesome. It sounded like Charlton Heston should be saying it. You know? Movie Charlton Heston, not NRA Charlton Heston.
Yeah. See, there's even more than one Charlton Heston.
That's right.
So see, we're learning things all the time. So
right.
no, I want to hear the previews of coming attractions.
Previews of coming attractions. We are going to take time and unpack Bill's letter. We will be playing some segments of the letter, and Tom and I will be discussing those things. That's upcoming.
All right, we'll say what the letter is, because we're starting this.
The letter is the letter that Bill wrote in 1956 that became a Grapevine article in 58. And to me, it is such a great synthesis of all of Bill's ideas about this issue of emotional sobriety. You can tease them out of the 12 and 12, the 12 Steps of Alcoholics Anonymous and 12 Traditions that he wrote in 1950, that was published in 52. Even early on, when you look at the writings in the Big Book back in the 35, you'll see evidence of this stuff, that it was starting to I call it percolate inside Bill. He was starting to grasp with some of these ideas, but it really came together for him, in after about 20 years in recovery. So that's exciting. We're going to look at that 15 to 20 years. And that point, he really started to really connect the dots on things. And it's a great Grapevine article, and it's available on the internet. If you just type in Bill Wilson, emotional sobriety, the next frontier, you'll be able to pull it up. So that's
and let me just say that that's the place where that I get the part about the dependency beneath the other dependencies. It's like, because ultimately it is him drilling down to that. It's the core of the wound.
It is the core. He called it his basic flaw. I mean, he really looked at it as that, and it's important, I think, and I've taken the writings and the reflections on master psychotherapists, and I say, my God, they were all talking about this same thing Bill was talking about, which is exciting. My God, there's something to it. If everybody is seeing this, there's something going on here. So that's exciting. We're going to be doing that. We're going to be unpacking that letter. We're also inviting some of guests from our Thursday night emotional sobriety meeting to come in and share their experience, what it means to them, what emotional sobriety looks like in their life. So you're going to be hearing that. We will also be having programs dedicated to the work of various people. Like in the future, we will have a whole day where we'll be looking at Bill Wilson and his life and how he brought this to. We're going to look at Ernie Larson. And we're going to look at what Ernie did. Melody Beattie in her work in terms of Codependent No More. Pia Melody and how she ties in some of her stuff. So different times, we'll even take some psychotherapists like Fritz Perls. We'll look at some of the people that influenced your life. These are going to be fantastic programs because we're going to put spotlights on people. And we want to show you that Tom and I, while we are creative and we're original in some things, we're also standing on the shoulders of all of those that have come before us. And then we're hopefully building on what they've done and moving it forward a few inches, or hopefully sometimes a few yards, and maybe significantly so. So I want you to understand that. That's the context of what we're doing here, is we want to help you be able to see this from so many different angles, and to see that what we're talking about is something that is what I would like to think of is the key to learning how to live a life where you can feel happy, joyous, and free.
Well, one of the things that you remind me of here is just something that I've known people who have been just fascinating and expert and imaginative experiential therapists, for instance. It's like it could take people into these experiences that are just amazing, but they don't. And this is not a criticism; this is an observation. But what they do is people will come out of those sessions with those people, and they will feel enlightened. They'll feel recharged. They'll feel renewed. They'll feel lots of different things, but they don't necessarily know exactly what's happened. and I've been through I've had some wonderful therapists who were that way, that basically they took me through the process. What I think that we do differently across the board is we're constantly training everybody to be therapists. It's like we're I want people, when we do when we sit there across, getting that empty chair, we say, let's have this intrapersonal conversation. I want people to understand what, I want people to have the emotional experience of that, but I want people to understand why it is that we're doing that and what the purpose of that is. And I want them to take their own version of that and be able to practice it, as they leave that session. And I think that's one of the things where I connect to you. I don't think I've actually thought of it in just this way until this moment, Alan. But one of the things that I think we do have in common is that we are always wanting to educate our clients as to what we're doing and what we're thinking.
One of the presidents of the American Psychological Association, his platform that he ran on was turning psychology over to the general public. What he wanted to do, he called them the unwashed, right? Turning psychology over to the unwashed. And his platform was, if the ideas that we're talking about and concepts that we're talking about have any value, if they are really valid, it means they're going to help people live a better life. And that was his whole platform in terms of running as president. And I totally got that. I mean, to me, that meant so much, because that's what's happened in my life. I know it's happened in your life. We've taken these things, on both sides of the couch, man. We're the therapist and we've been the client. I mean, we've embraced both of those roles, and we've learned a lot from both sides of that couch.
Yep.
And that's what we bring to our clients. And in many ways, we recreate that same experience.
A concept is only as good as we can make it when we translate that to practice. That's right. And it's like that's what this is about too. It's like, well, okay, so always, if it feels, I would say, when I'm saying inviting people to respond to us as we go along, if it's always a welcome question. If I feel like because I can certainly get carried away with a concept that I find myself fascinated with, and you and I can do that together sometimes. It's like if somebody needs to send a question, stop us. Patrick's really good at actually doing this, so you got somebody on hand to do that, to be able to say, okay, well, that's fine, that's all fine and good, but how do you do that?
Yeah, that's right.
I love this notion of kind of democratizing the process, bringing more people into it. And of course, the podcast is just another outlet of that.
Yes.
Exactly right. That's right up. Okay, so that's it, folks. Welcome to Emotional Sobriety.
I'm excited.
And we'll see you next week.
Tend your life. Tend your myth. Cultivate your narrative with whomever you're with. Then with glass in hand and children on one knee, bring some stories, bring your stories back to me. It ain't a crime to be a human. Never be ashamed to be yourself. Rest assured that whatever you're doing will entertain me like nobody else. So here's to us, my old friends, until it's time to drink the wine and break the bread again. With glass in hand and children on one knee, bring some stories, bring your stories back to me.